There is a beach in Barbuda called Princess Diana Beach. It is long, flat, pink-tinged from crushed coral and so quiet on most days that the only sounds are the sea and the wind and the calling of the frigate birds. Diana visited in 1997 and called it the most beautiful beach she had ever seen. 3 months later, she was dead. Barbuda named that beach after her. Then, in September 2017, Hurricane Irma arrived. A Category 5 storm, one of the most powerful ever recorded in the Atlantic, passed almost directly over Barbuda and destroyed 95% of its structures. The entire population of roughly 1,800 people was excavated to Antigua. The beach survived. The island had to be rebuilt. This is Antigua and Barbuda. 2 islands, together just 442 square kilometers, a population of around 98,000, and a history of sugar, of slavery, of cricket, of hurricane that is both particular to this corner of the Caribbean and entirely universal to the story of what the Atlantic world made of itself over 4 centuries. Welcome back to Around the World in Half an Hour. I'm Ray and this is episode 6. We left Angola last week, scarred, resilient, still dancing. Now we cross the Atlantic and head to the Caribbean, to a twin island nation that most people would describe, if asked, as a holiday destination. Beautiful beaches, sailing sun. And that's all true. But the country that produced Sir Viv Richards, that endured 350 years of unbroken British rule, that was devastated and rebuilt itself, and whose novelist, Jamaica Kincaid, wrote one of the most searing critiques of colonialism and tourism in the English language. That country deserves more than a postcard. Let's give it that. Antigua and Barbuda sit in the Eastern Caribbean, in the Leeward Islands chain of the Lesser Antilles, roughly 650 kilometers southeast of Puerto Rico. Antigua is the larger island, about 280 square kilometers, and home to around 97% of the population. Barbuda is quieter, flatter, more remote, sitting about 48 kilometers to the north. Antigua's landscape is unlike most Caribbean islands. It lacks the dramatic volcanic peaks of neighbors like Montserrat or Dominica. It is low-lying, gently rolling, built primarily from limestone and coral rather than volcanic rock. The highest point, Mount Obama, renamed in 2009 from Boggy Peak in honor of the then newly elected US President, reaches about 402 meters. What Antigua lacks in elevation, it compensates in coastline. Its shore is deeply indented by bays, coves, and natural harbors, giving rise to the claim of 365 beaches, one for every day of the year. That number is approximate, but the point it makes is real. This is an island defined by its relationship with the sea. The third entity in the national name is Redonda, a tiny uninhabited volcanic rock about 56 kilometers southwest of Antigua, technically part of the country, famous mainly for being claimed as a literary kingdom since the late 19th century, with a succession of writers, including John Updike and J.K. Rowling, having been jokingly appointed as its dukes and barons. It is inaccessible, covered in seabirds, and has no permanent human presence whatsoever. Barbuda is flat, limestone mostly. Its greatest natural treasure is the Codrington Lagoon, a vast, shallow, protected lagoon in the western side of the island that shelters the largest frigate bird colony in the Western Hemisphere. Magnificent frigate birds, their wingspan up to 2.3 meters, nest here by the thousands. The males inflate startlingly red-throat pouches to attract females. The sound and sight of this colony is one of the great natural spectacles of the Caribbean. Antigua and Barbuda has no land borders. Its nearest neighbors are Saint Kitts and Nevis to the west, Guadeloupe to the south, and Montserrat, a British overseas territory, to the southwest. Antigua's position near the top of the Caribbean island arc, at a point the British considered strategically vital for watching French activity in Guadeloupe, gave it English Harbour, one of the finest natural harbours in the Caribbean, and with it, a chapter of history inextricably bound to the British Royal Navy. The first inhabitants of these islands were the Siboney people, who arrived around 2400 BCE from South America, followed later by Arawak-speaking Taino peoples. Christopher Columbus sailed past Antigua on his second voyage in 1493 and named it after the church of Santa Maria la Antigua in Seville. He did not land. The English arrived in 1632 and began colonizing Antigua, turning first to tobacco and then to what would define the next 2 centuries, sugar. By the early 18th century, Antigua was a fully developed sugar colony. Sugar required enslaved African labor on an enormous scale, and it got it. Tens of thousands of people shipped across the Middle Passage, forced to work on estates like Betty's Hope, the plantation established by the Codrington family. The Codrington family had received a royal grant for the entire island of Barbuda in 1685, using it to supply food and workers for their Antigua plantation. The main town of Barbuda still carries the name Codrington, a permanent geographical memorial to the history. The enslaved population significantly outnumbered the white settler class. Resistance was constant. Prince Klass, also known as Court, led the most significant planned uprising in 1736, a sophisticated conspiracy involving hundreds of enslaved people, discovered before it could be executed. He was captured and executed with calculated brutality. He is today a national hero of Antigua and Barbuda. His courage in attempting to reclaim freedom belongs in the same conversation as any story of Caribbean resistance. Slavery was abolished in 1834, but freedom did not bring economic liberation. The sugar economy declined across the 19th century, taking the colonial economy down with it. The real turning point came in 1939 when Antiguan workers revolted in the wider wave of Caribbean labor insurrections of the late 1930s, forming the Antigua Trades and Labor Union. From that movement emerged Ware Cornwall Bird, V.C. Bird, who led the union, led the independence movement, and became the country's first prime minister when Antigua and Barbuda became independent on November 1st, 1981, after 349 years of British rule. The darkest single event in Antiguan history came on September 6, 2017, when Hurricane Irma, Category 5, sustained winds of 295 kilometers per hour, passed almost directly over Barbuda and destroyed 95% of the island's structures. The entire Barbudan population was evacuated. It was the first time the island had been completely uninhabited since human settlement began over 4,000 years ago. Rebuilding is ongoing, and the politics of that rebuilding, communal land rights versus development pressures, remain actively contested. The country is a constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy, with St. John's as its capital. Tourism dominates the economy, accounting for nearly 60% of GDP, a dependency that makes the country deeply vulnerable to hurricanes, global recessions, and pandemics, as COVID-19 demonstrated with devastating clarity. The currency is the Eastern Caribbean dollar, pegged to the US dollar and shared across several neighboring islands. Antigua has been one of the Caribbean's most vocal advocates for climate justice at international forums. A small island state on the front lines of rising seas and intensifying storms, arguing with moral force that those who contributed least to the problem are bearing most of its consequences. Let's take a look at some of the remarkable people Antigua and Barbuda has produced. Sir Viv Richards, born March 7th, 1952 in St. John's, the greatest batsman the Caribbean has produced, and by many reckonings, the greatest of all time. In 121 test matches, he scored 8,540 runs at an average of 50.23, captained the West Indies without losing a single test series, and made the fastest test century in history. 56 balls against England in Antigua in 1986. He played his entire international career without a batting helmet, not as bravado, but as a statement. He would not be intimidated. He is a national hero of Antigua and Barbuda. To Antiguans, he is simply King Viv. Andy Roberts, born 1951 in Erling's Village, the first Antiguan to play Test cricket for the West Indies. A fast bowler of terrifying accuracy, whose deceptive slower ball undid batsmen who had survived the rapid delivery. Roberts paved the way for a generation of Antiguan cricketers, Richards, Richie Richardson, Curtly Ambrose, who would form the backbone of the most dominant cricket team in the world. Curtly Ambrose, born 1963 in Sweets Village, standing at 6'7" he was one of the most feared fast bowlers in cricket history. 405 test wickets at an average of 20.99, including a spell against South Africa in 1994, 7 wickets for 1 run in 32 deliveries, that many regard as the single greatest bowling performance ever. He retired, and in a development that delights everyone who hears it, became the bass guitarist in a reggae band. Jamaica Kincaid, born Elaine Potter Richardson in 1949 in St. John's. She moved to the United States as a teenager, became a New Yorker staff writer, and published A Small Place in 1988, a fierce, precise, deeply personal indictment of colonialism and the tourism economy that replaced it. It is one of the most important works of Caribbean literature and one of the most uncompromising books about what tourism actually means and costs. Her writing carries the electrical charge of someone who loves a place and cannot forgive what was done to it. Antiguan cuisine is Caribbean cooking at its most honest. Fresh seafood, hearty root vegetables, tropical fruit, and the African culinary traditions preserved and adapted across centuries of colonial history. Fungi and pepper pot, the national dish. Fungi is a smooth cornmeal dumpling, the starchy base of the meal cooked firm and served alongside pepper pot, a slow-cooked stew of pork, saltfish, and seasonal vegetables, seasoned with herbs and local peppers. It sustained the working population of this island for centuries, and it remains the dish Antiguans reach for when they want something that feels completely like home. Saltfish appears everywhere, dried, salted, rehydrated, and cooked as a direct legacy of the colonial trade routes that made preserved fish the cheapest available protein. It appears in breakfast, in pepper pot, and as saltfish cakes, fried cornmeal, and saltfish fritters served with a pepper sauce. Tucana, a sweet potato and coconut dumpling wrapped in a banana leaf and boiled. Sweet, slightly dense, perfect alongside saltfish. The combination of tucana and saltfish is as Antiguan as cricket. Barbuda lobster, the seafood highlight of the whole country. Spiny Caribbean lobsters caught in the warm, shallow waters around Barbuda, shipped fresh to Antigua and regarded as among the finest in the Caribbean. Grilled with lime and butter on a Barbudan beach, they are one of the defining gastronomic experiences of this part of the world. Wadadli beer, the local brew named after the Arawak word for Antigua. Its name is a small reminder that before Columbus, before sugar, before the British, people called this island something else entirely. Antigua's carnival, held from late July through the first Tuesday in August, is timed to commemorate the abolition of slavery in 1834. It is calypso, steel pan, soca, elaborate costumed parade bands, and the kind of collective, embodied joy that functions simultaneously as celebration and as a political statement. Music here is not entertainment separate from life. It is how memory and identity move through a community. The Wari, a traditional African seed counting board game brought to Antigua by enslaved people and preserved across centuries, is still played with the quiet fluency of a living tradition. It is one of the oldest games in the world and it has never left this island. Cricket is Antigua's identity, history, and the clearest demonstration of how an art form introduced by colonizers was taken, transformed, and made into an instrument of pride. The colonial planters imported the game. Their enslaved people initially retrieved the ball from the sugarcane fields. Physical strength, born of hard labor, eventually made them formidable fast bowlers. And from there, through generations, came the greatest cricket team in the world in the 1970s and 1980s. And from a country of under 100,000 people, four of its finest players. That statistical impossibility, Roberts, Richards, Richardson, Ambrose, all from the same small island, is the most astonishing fact in the history of the sport. The Sir Vivian Richards Cricket Stadium in North Sound, built for the 2007 ICC Cricket World Cup, seats 10,000 and continues to host international cricket. When Viv Richards walks into a room in Antigua, he does not need to be introduced. Most visitors come for the beach or sailing week, the internationally famous April regatta that draws hundreds of yachts to English harbour and makes Antigua briefly one of the most prestigious sailing destinations on earth. Neither is a wrong reason to come. The beaches are real, the sailing is magnificent, but Jamaica Kincaid's, a small place, has permanently complicated the easy transaction of Caribbean tourism for anyone who reads it. The insight that a visitor's paradise is built on a history of suffering, that the relationship between tourist and islander is never as simple as the brochure suggests. Antigua embodies this more starkly than most. What Antigua and Barbuda most wants visitors to understand is that it is a nation with specific and complex history, not a backdrop for their holiday. That Prince Klass and Viv Richards are part of the same history. That the beach you are lying on has a past as well as a present. Come, enjoy it, but know what you're standing on. Antigua and Barbuda, 365 beaches, the finest restored Georgian dockyard in the Caribbean, the greatest batsman cricket has seen, the most important Caribbean novel about what tourism costs, frigate birds nesting in their thousands on an island a hurricane nearly erased, small in size, enormous in story. Next Monday, we head to South America for the first time, to Argentina, the land of tango and football, and Patagonia, and the Pampas, one of the great beef cultures on earth, of Borges and Maradona, and of a political and economic history as dramatic and turbulent as any in the hemisphere. That's next Monday at 7 p.m. Please subscribe or follow wherever you're listening and leave a rating if you can. I'm Ray. We've been to Antigua and Barbuda. Know what you're standing on.